So good morning, everyone, and good afternoon and good day wherever you are. Welcome to the virtual biorepository resources for COVID-19 and other diseases of epidemic potential webinar. This is really a global grassroots conversation that we're having with all of you, and we're so delighted that you have joined us. So I think what we can do is maybe go to the next slide. Thank you. So here's some housekeeping rules as attendees are still joining in. So this session is recorded and will be shared on the Global Health Network. And if you would like to ask questions, there is a box Q&A located at the bottom of your screen, and please post your question there. And during the question and answer session, if you'd like to ask a question verbally, please raise your hand. Otherwise, I will be reading as the moderator your questions from the Q&A box and put it to the panel. If you need any technical assistance, please message the panel through the chat and someone will be there to assist you. Next slide, please. So this is our agenda, just quickly going over it. I'm Mei Chu, and I'm from the Colorado School of Public Health at the Center for Public Health, Global Health, and I'm a clinical professor here, but been very, very interested in the idea of creating what we call biorepository networks, especially virtual biorepositories, and that the agenda here will be here with my introduction, welcome, and then Anthony Risk from the Global Health Center, and Rosanna Peeling from London School of Hygiene Tropical Medicine, followed by Stefano Ogarello, from FIND, Xavier de Lambéry from Aix-Marseille Université, and Rosa Margarita Galvez from also Colombia, and then Li Qingning from Singapore. We're really, really fortunate to have this panel here to set the stage for you. After the session, after the presentations to set the stage for you, I will moderate some questions and answers, and then my colleague will be going through a benefits survey question for you, followed then by some discussion on our Global Health Network, Global Repository Knowledge Hub. Next slide, please. So I'm really grateful to the TGHN staff here. I cannot thank you enough, Trudy and your crew, for joining up with us to hold this session and for you to begin to take this journey with us on the virtual biorepository. And next slide, please. This is an open workshop. And the reason we're doing this is we want to engage the stakeholder community on a conversation. This is the start of it, on how to develop a fair and equitable system to access materials critical for research, diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccines. And with all of us together on this group to begin to define what a sustainable solution could be for contributors and users alike. Next slide, please. In this first conversation, we want your help to identify what a virtual biorepository could achieve. We want to ask you, what should the benefits be for participating in the virtual biorepository? And we also want to know what you think are the risks associated with this approach, and then really more deeper dive into the conversation later on the risk and how do we mitigate them. Next slide. So we have structured today's conversation as the program I've shown you. You'll be guided by speakers who will lay out the situation, offer ideas. We'll guide you through a questionnaire on benefits and barriers for you as participants in a biorepository, and then we will outline for you the creation of a global biorepository knowledge hub to share ideas and solutions. And thank you for our panelists who have joined us. They have been wonderful, and I think you'll get a very good idea of how things will happen. And please feel free to provide your questions to us, because we want to have as lively a conversation as we can. Okay. So thank you very much. And then we will begin with the presenters. And our first presenter will be Anthony Risk from the Global Health Center in the Graduate Institute, Geneva. Anthony just presented his work 2 days ago on pathogens and benefit sharing. And I asked him to sort of help us set the stage by outlining some of the issues in his research. Please, Anthony, take it away.
Thank you very much, May, and thank you very much for inviting us to present some of our findings from this research project that we've been working on. I'm a PhD student at the Graduate Institute of Geneva, and over the past 2 years, I've been working with Dr. Suri Moon and Dr. Gianluca Burki at the Global Health Center on a project on pathogen and benefit sharing. As May just mentioned, this project culminated in a working paper that was just published earlier this week. And you can find the full working paper on our event, on our project page, as well as the recording of the dissemination event and discussion we held on Tuesday. The main objectives of the project were to better understand the current practices of pathogen and benefit sharing, identify places where PBS, as we're calling it, was working and not working, and identify the different governance and policy options that are being discussed. And the motivation is, of course, the changing international rules around pathogen and benefit sharing with coming into force of the Nagoya Protocol, a binding international instrument that stipulates that fair and equitable benefits need to be on equal footing with the sharing of genetic resources, in this case, the sharing of pathogens. There's been calls for the global governance of pathogens and discussion around how to govern pathogens over the last few years. And empirical clarity is needed, hence motivating this research project. In this presentation, I won't be able to cover all of the findings, but I will focus on 3 key areas of our research. One is benefit sharing and what it meant to the people we spoke to. Second is capacity building and what is working and not working. And third are some of the informal policy options discussed with our interviewees. Just to give a quick idea of our methods, we triangulated from 3 sources. One is the data from the influenza virus traceability mechanism that documents movements of influenza viruses of pandemic potential worldwide. Secondly, we conducted 86 interviews, 53 of which were with different actors, global actors on pathogen benefit sharing, both on the policy side and on the side of practice, and many falling in both categories. And we also did 2 case studies on Ebola and Zika PBS. And thirdly, we analyzed material transfer agreements looking at benefit sharing provisions. The study comes with limitations, so findings need to be interpreted within those limitations. And I invite you to look at the working paper in more detail to see the methods and the full findings. I wanted to first start by giving a quick overview of our findings on benefits and benefit sharing. In general, the interviewees and the respondents who generously shared their time with us and that we spoke to had a clear picture on pathogen sharing, on how pathogens are being shared and where they're being shared. When it came to benefits, generally, there was a lot more different understandings of benefits. However, there were key areas of consensus. One, that the international norms, so how people share benefits, has changed over the last few years. Many respondents emphasized that practices that used to be acceptable in the past, such as scientists going to different countries, collecting pathogens, returning to their countries for studies, are no longer as widely acceptable as they used to be. And this is also reflected in a wider use of material transfer agreements globally, as well as presence of legal offices negotiating and drafting these agreements. Secondly, there was consensus among a critical mass of our interviewees on the need for fair and equitable benefit sharing when it came to the movement of pathogens. However, there was a very large variation in what benefits mean, and especially in ascertaining what a fair and equitable benefit would be. We grouped these different variations under 4 broad categories presented here. One, that the benefit of pathogen sharing is contributing to the global good. 2, academic recognition, so the sharing of authorship, credit, and long-term collaboration. 3, preparedness and response, so a lot of interviewees, and I should flag here that especially interviewees from lower and middle income countries tended to identify the need for capacity building, as well as access to information and access to medical countermeasures, drugs, vaccines, pharmaceuticals, and diagnostics as benefits when pathogens are shared. And the fourth category were economic returns, so intellectual property rights, royalties, financial benefits. These are not mutually exclusive, they're just a categorization of different areas of how benefits were understood by the people, by the respondents in our research. And I just wanted to quickly say that in our study of the MTAs, in the 26 MTAs we looked at, and some of those were executed because MTAs are confidential, many of those were MTA samples or templates. Capacity building was far less found among the MTAs. I think only 2 out of the 26 MTAs we studied had the provisions for capacity building as a benefit. But there were more provisions related to the sharing of academic benefits and sharing outcomes of the research. I wanted to quickly discuss some of the things that were identified as not working. One, a lot of our respondents discussed the role that global disparities in technology and capacity play when it comes to pathogen and benefit sharing. A lot of interviewees, especially from lower and middle income countries, who generally for scientists or countries that would prefer to keep samples in country for in-country research and development, tended to share because of the absence of necessary research and diagnostic capacity in country. And this became particularly heightened and politicized when it came to pathogens that are highly pathogenic samples that need high containment facilities. And this contributed to narratives that appeared in our interviewees about the need for local biobanking and biorepository capacity. Another key area that is not working, that I'm just emphasizing here for this presentation, is of course the absence of clear and comprehensive arrangements and regulations, the different rules that are emerging in different countries, particularly in light of the coming into force of the Nagoya Protocol. And such uncertainty also coexisted with hope that the current phase of uncertainty and discussions that are happening will lead to fairer and more equitable governance in the future. Which takes me to this last slide that I want to share with you, which are what are the options. We discussed many different policy options with our study participants, ranging from the more formal options to the left, which are more so multilaterally negotiated frameworks among governments with stakeholders from different parties. I wanted to focus here more on the informal options, which included, for example, that you might want to consider developing codes of conduct and ethical guidelines that codify the changing norms around pathogen and benefit sharing that can also be backed by governments and civil society organizations and different institutions, as well as given the expanded use of MTAs worldwide, the development of standardized MTAs that can smoothen the process of ensuring reliable pathogen sharing while also ensuring that benefit sharing provisions are in place. I just wanted to emphasize some key points coming out of our research. One, that there was substantial agreement among our interviewees that benefit sharing needs to come on equal footing with pathogen sharing. And two, that the Nagoya Protocol is contributing to changing norms and a climate of uncertainty, but also there is hope, as I had said before, that this period of uncertainty will lead to more fairness and equitability in the future. An informal approach could be, is important to develop codifying these changing norms and support and contributes to a global governance system of pathogen benefit sharing. But informal approaches need to also keep in mind that there need to be clear and enforceable commitments to share from the parties involved, as well as clear, fair, and equitable benefit sharing provisions. And this will need a lot of discussion to ascertain exactly what these would be. This does not negate the need for formal approaches in order to reach a level of coherence on the level of global governance on pathogen benefit sharing, because as we know, with the COVID pandemic, outbreaks don't wait, and we need to build the international systems to respond to this. Please do please do feel free to ask me more questions to go more in depth on different parts of this presentation. And thank you so much for inviting us.
Thank you very much. You've put in front of us at our feet many, many issues that we could discuss and many interesting aspects of it. And I hope that our audience has some questions for you. We will address Anthony's excellent presentation at the end in the question and answer session. So thank you again. Our next speaker is Dr. Rosanna Peeling, a longtime colleague and friend from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. And she's going to talk about the governance of biobank networks for diagnostics. And her recent work with Africa CDC as well. She's been a champion of Biorepository for many years. I've worked with her and have really appreciated the clear thinking that she brings to this topic. So Rosanna, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, May. And what I'm going to say actually is from years of experience, first working with Mark Perkins when I was at TDR, was setting up the TB specimen bank and specimen banks for other tropical diseases and also sexually transmitted diseases. And based on actually the setup, the models of how to set up these biobanks depended a lot on the recommendations of our expert committee, as well as whether the funds that are available and what the community wanted. And so, but in general, the governance for these networks are very clear. It should be underlined by basic principles. And in this slide, I just show you the main principles underlying, should underline most biobanks in terms of governance. And so first of all, there's the ethical component, the protection of individuals, so that the rights of individuals actually prevail over the interests of other stakeholders, especially commercial ventures and even science, so that you cannot experiment on people just in the name of science. And then participation and inclusion. And this is very much underlined by the Declaration of Helsinki that we're all familiar with. The latest version is 2013, and that upholds the dignity and the autonomy of participants to participate in health research, which includes contributing specimens for research, and that they are entitled to privacy and confidentiality, and also the participation can be withdrawn at any time. And now with a lot of big databases and biobanks, there must be the principle of transparency, that everything there should be no secret sort of agendas and procedures. And throughout our work, the issue of ownership of the specimens has been very important. And we like to emphasize that whoever contribute these specimens, the specimens ultimately belong to them, even if we form a network and use them for a common purpose. Ultimately, the countries or the institutions that contribute own the specimens. And then the final principle is the accessibility and accountability of all these health databases and banks to all stakeholders. And so in 2016, there was a more specific declaration called Declaration of Taipei that specify more of the ethical processes which should take into account the willingness and trust of those donating and sharing their specimens and data with the specimens, while acknowledging the obligation of high standards of protection of confidentiality and privacy in the use of these specimens. And so there's not a lot of practical guidance with the Declaration of Taipei. I think that's still to be elaborated. And then as Anthony had mentioned the Nagoya Protocol, which we adopted from the Convention about Diversity, is something that we all look to for the fair and equitable sharing of benefits as a priority for the international communities, so that people are really being treated fairly for having contributed specimens to the bank for a common good. So how does this work? And so in terms of the governance, this is a sort of generic mechanism for how you would uphold these values for a biobank network. And so normally there's a steering committee that provides the oversight overall to the legal framework of the network, and then the acquisition and the access of the specimens. But other than the steering committee, there should be the work should be underscored by good science. And so there should usually be a scientific committee that looks at how specimens are acquired, how they're stored, and mostly with regard to ethics approval and the respect for national laws in terms of transportation of the specimens. There should be usually a community representative, especially when the collection is on a special say community in terms of a condition that for which the specimen bank is set up. And so this is the acquisition side. On the access side, as Anthony has already pointed out, material transfer agreements, biosecurity, how the specimens are stored, how long, when should they be disposed of after so many years. All these issues in terms of material transfer agreement and how to process the data, who could access the data, etc., or should all be set out under this governance mechanism. And depending on how the biobank is set up, some banks do audits of sites and to make sure that the quality and the guiding principles are upheld for each one of the sites contributing to the network. Some of them do tracking of what happens to the specimens in terms of did it produce the kind of results that the applicants to the bank had promised. And so I think in a lot of instances, we don't have the ability to track all the outcomes of how the specimens have been used. But in any case, I think it could be a voluntary reporting or it could be officially tracked based on the resources available. And then finally, there's this very sticky issue of intellectual property arising from the use of these specimens, especially when it comes to diagnostics. There could be a lot of issues. I remember during the time of SARS, countries were not willing to share specimens, especially from developing countries, because they said, whatever you develop, either a diagnostic or a vaccine, we would probably not be able to afford it. So why should we do that? Why should we share and have nothing in return? So I hope that the adoption of the Nagoya Protocol would resolve some of those issues. Now to COVID, and most recently to helping Africa CDC set up their biobanking network. So with this, I show you the organogram in term and the operations all in one, which actually is underlined by the governance that I just talked about. And so within the Africa CDC for COVID and for other diseases of epidemic potential, we've now set up a steering group that will provide the overall governance for the entire network across the continent. And then there's a separate scientific advisory committee that looks at specimen collection and all the procedures, and then access to the specimens, either requests for specimens for test development, or the use of specimens for laboratory evaluations of new tests that are available. And then finally, requests of specimens for research, such as sequencing. And I must say that Africa CDC has just recently launched Institute for Pathogen Genomics, which will use these specimens that are collected, or isolates that are collected for COVID, and for in the future for other diseases of epidemic potential. So I'll stop there and be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Unmute myself first, but thank you so much for that, because I think you've laid the groundwork for a number of issues and questions following Anthony's presentation, something concrete to think about. So thank you. We'll take the questions at the end of the panelists when they complete their talk. So the next person up is Stefano Orgueiro. Sorry, Stefano. And he is from FIND, and he is the going to present on identifying specimens for COVID-19 diagnostics and the FIND Integrated Biobank and Virtual Directory. So please take it away.
Thank you, May. Thank you, everyone who is attending. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. So FIND is the Foundation for Innovative New Diagnostics. We are an NGO based in Geneva, Switzerland, and we work in the space of diagnostics. Our main mission is to support the development and the access to diagnostics for infectious diseases, especially for the world's poorest populations. So one of the things that have been very obvious since the COVID-19 pandemic started and evolved is that there is a clear need for Biobank, and the Biobank is actually instrumental in our response because it supported both diagnostics and therapeutics. What we have seen is there's been an increase in the demand for samples, especially well-characterized samples, but unfortunately this demand has not really been matched due to a lot of circumstances, but mostly I would narrow these down to lack of preparedness and lack of infrastructure that is specifically suited for the purpose of a rapid response to an epidemic that now has unfortunately turned into a proper pandemic. For COVID-19, but just not for COVID-19, good samples, the truth is good samples are very hard to find. And when I mean good samples, I mean samples that have been collected following good quality standards and are well characterized, which means that they are fit for a purpose, which is then ultimately either the development of diagnostics or the development of therapeutics. In general, what we see today with biobanks is that there seems to be a difficulty in being able to act fast, and a lot of biobanks also face sustainability issues. What I mean by this is that a lot of biobanks store samples in their freezer for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years without real use of these samples. This is clearly something that is not optimal and is not what a biobank is designed to do. So one other issue that Rosanna has very well brought up, and Anthony before her, is the fact that we witness more and more difficulties in engaging with low and middle income countries who rightly fear about the use of the samples, and mostly because the concern is that these samples will be used then to support industries and companies placed in the Western world without any sort of benefits coming to them. So what I want to discuss today is our vision, FIND's vision for Biobank. And this vision is fundamentally based on a concept that is a network of biobanks to support pandemic preparedness. And this network focuses on the idea of facilitating the development of diagnostics and the implementation of diagnostics as well. Our approach is based on four main pillars. So our model of biobanks is disease agnostic. So this means it can easily adapted to different types of diseases. And how do we do this? Well, we do this with standardized procedures, some standardized equipment as much as we can, standardized data operations, meaning using the same systems, using the same vocabulary to collect the data so that then everything can be used afterwards in many different purposes. And we do this by placing biobanks in key locations. The strategy of putting biobanks in places all over the world where we can actually have a network that can act on different type of diseases or with different seasonality or with different patterns is absolutely critical. We have a vision that is adapted to the needs of the industry, which means having samples that are in line with the needs of the industry, which means samples that are available straight away and that follow that can even be used for future development. So this means basically a tight interaction with R&D. We want to empower research and development in low and middle income countries. So everything that we do is in the context, in the framework of access and benefit sharing. FIND has a commitment to capacity building. Capacity building can take different forms based on where we work. It can be infrastructure, it can be training for personnel, it can be quality, it can be, as I said a minute ago, data. And we encourage sites to not just be a place for collection of material, but actually to participate in activities of R&D, for instance, diagnostics evaluation. This is another key activity that FIND has been conducting since its onset. But with COVID-19, we have developed a lot. We have performed a lot of diagnostic evaluations. We want countries to be part of this work and also participate in decisions about the use of these samples. And last, but of course not least, the visibility of the samples is extremely important. We need to facilitate the access to these samples that once collected have to be used. The good samples are the ones that are used, not the ones that stay in the biobank. So the concept of the FIND integrated biobanks is actually quite simple. And it's basically a network of biobank. A network means a series of sites that operate as a part, each one independently, but as part of a system. And these sites can work under the coordination and governance of FIND. FIND therefore provides support for everything that is capacity and standardization and training and financial support for all those matters like ethics, imports, exports, permits, everything like that. And from the point of view of a user, so somebody that will want to access these samples, we try to make it as simple as possible, which basically means a single point of contact, which happens through a portal that we have developed specifically for this purpose. Again, the concept here is that we are talking about a network. So a network means we have different sites that work independently, but then are part of something bigger that regulates and provides general support. Now, I just spoke about an infrastructure to access samples and this is what we call the virtual biobank directory. This is basically an online platform, which we have just launched. The purpose of this platform is to provide visibility to samples. Now, there are samples that are part of the FIND integrated biobanks, but this platform is a free resource that is open to everyone. So every biobank, every laboratory that has samples can use this resource to advertise the samples, to put information about their catalog, and this will facilitate, in our view, the process of request of samples, because it will provide basically a very easy way to know where samples for a specific disease are, what is the intended use, and how people can then access these samples. I mentioned the fact that we work worldwide and we have a focus on low and middle income countries. We have already several sites that are engaged into the FIND integrated biobanks. Some of these are already collecting samples for COVID-19. Others will start soon to collect samples or might be placed in locations where COVID-19 luckily has not a very high incidence, and therefore in this case they will act as surveillance sites and sites that will be providing collection for other types of disease. Where we stand right now, we have, as I said, a few members already signed. We have a complete set of working instructions, documents, framework, and policies developed. Our virtual biobank is already operational, and we are now looking for biobanks that want to be part of this project, either as part of the integrated network of biobanks or as a part of collaborators that will provide samples that then will be made publicly available through our virtual biobank directory. Thank you very much. I will be happy to answer then any questions afterwards.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that presentation, and really exciting that this is coming along, because I think we've long talked about how to connect with other biobanks, and this is a way. And I know some people in the audience are interested in the directory, so I'm sure you'll have some questions at the end. So thank you very much. So we're going to move on to the next speaker, and it will be Dr. Xavier de Lambereri, and he's from the Aix-Marseille University in Marseille, France. And he's going to talk about the European Virus Archive, and it's a model for what we say could be a model for a successful virtual biorepository. So Xavier, please.
I will say a few words about the European Virus Archive, which is a collection of viruses and virus-derived material. And I think it has some relevance in this discussion. Try to not to be too long, just to say a few words about how it was created and give a kind of short historical perspective. In the late 90s, I was in Oxford, and this is the kind of virus collection that we had at this time in Oxford. I mean, in Oxford, we had two fantastic collections from James Porterfield and from Ernie Gould. And I mean, the collection from James Porterfield was in garbage bags in a cold room, and you can see the kind of freezers that you could find at this time for keeping viruses. So there was a real problem there, a technical problem, I would say. And looking at the situation in Europe, there was a real problem. It was not easy to obtain viruses. The quality of viruses was not good. For example, there was nearly 10% of misidentification. The rules were not clear. I mean, there were some ethical issues there. The intellectual property was used as a pretext to keep viruses, not giving them. There was despoiling of originators. The collections were not correctly managed, so some of them were nearly exhausted. And in fact, most of them were kind of ossuaries where nothing was getting out from the collection. And finally, there was a strategic issue, which was that in Europe, there was no big organized supported collection, which was quite different from the US. And I mean, what really happened is that maybe you know that picture that was taken at the United Nations in February 2003, when the French Prime Minister refused that France entered in the coalition against Iraq. And after this, the United States stopped providing biological products to France for a while, and in particular viruses. And because of this, we were nearly obliged to create a collection. And the philosophy of this collection, newly created, was that first it would be a collection without walls, so a virtual biorepository, in fact, with well-characterized viruses, derived products, and that something absolutely crucial, but we wanted this collection, the collection not to be the owner of the viruses and leave the property to the originators of the products. And then it should be organized non-profit distribution of viruses to academics. So from this, Ernie Gould created these 10 commandments. I can take 1 or 2 minutes to talk about this because I think it's so important. There are some criteria about the scientific quality. So having comprehensive identifications of viruses, good methods for conservation, for storage, etc., etc. Then there are some ethical issues to ensure that no strains would be owned by EVA or by the EVA scientists, and that the intellectual property would remain with the originator. Then organize the distribution of the viruses, respect the rules of biosecurity, and finally, ensure that strains are supplied non-profitably to academic scientists. That was something that we decided very early. So now, EVA is a non-profit organization which is funded by the European Union. The goal is to produce, to characterize, to biobank, to distribute viruses and virus-associated resources for the scientific community. This covers some human viruses, animal viruses, plant viruses, and at this stage, no biological products from humans. the important thing is that all of the members share the same quality management system to deliver products with a very well-characterized quality. And there is a unique entry point, which is the European Virus Archive website, web-based catalog. So this is not so important. We have now a lot of partners everywhere. That's not what I want to talk about. This is the architecture of the consortium. I think you don't care very much about that. But finally, all the users can find the resources in a unique website. And through these websites, the requests are transmitted to the partners, and they can supply the user. This is very simple, but behind this simplicity, there are many rules and very, very heavy organization. I skip this. When we provide access to the resource, there is the user side. You go to the website and you see these nice pictures and the nice catalog. And when you are on the biobanker side, you have a very standardized way of providing the information on the viruses or the derived products. And last but not least, the importance of the quality management system is very important. For example, here you have to provide information about the category of material that you provide, and there are many different categories with very strict criteria. And my remark here would be that when you start a collection, the two things that you underestimate are the quality management system and the website. And these are absolutely crucial things. And this is again about the quality management system. Everything seems simple, but in fact, the organization of quality is something very, very demanding. We provide access through different mechanisms, free of charge access, and in this case, it's the European Commission that pays, paying access, and in all cases, the shipment fees are paid by the recipient of the resource. When people pay, the price that corresponds to the production cost. Of course, there is absolutely no benefit by the collection or by the members of the collection. So this is the different sites. What is important is that each site, for example, here in Marseille, can also develop its own sub-network in this region. This is our network, for example, in Marseille, and this way, the global network can grow progressively. I just wanted to give two small case studies of what we did in the past. The first one is Zika. You remember that when Zika arrived in the Americas, you can see that here the PHEIC declaration. You can see the products that were delivered at this time, and what is really striking is that most of the products were given very, very, very early. So if you want to play that game with emergence, if you come late, you come too late. You have to be ready very, very rapidly. If you want to see details on that, this has been published in a paper which is cited there. But that's really interesting to see that you really have to come very early. And what is also very interesting is that you provide material for research to academics, but also for public health institutions, for example, for diagnostics, and also to industries. So you have to get adapted to all of these potential customers. So this is the global distribution. That's not so important. And this is for COVID. So another very short example. So for COVID, we have distributed viral strains, detection kits, and things like that. And look at that. When you look at the distribution, really you have to be very fast. You see that the majority of the products were really delivered at the very, very beginning of the outbreak. If you arrive too late, nothing to do. If you come late, really early, you can really distribute in many countries very rapidly. Okay, so my conclusion is must be ready very early. The offer often creates the opportunity. That was the case, for example, for Zika, because we are really fast. Many countries which usually do not buy products to the European Virus Archive, like the USA bought hundreds of products. The customers are for research, diagnosis, and they are academics, public health bodies, and industrials. And you can find more details on the website of EVA. I think that's all on my side, May.
Thank you very much for that very insightful update, because I think, you know, people may be learning of EVA G Network right for the first time. And for some of us, it's very interesting how much advance and successes you've had. And we hope you stay with us through this journey and conversation. Thank you very much, Xavier. So we're going to go to the next speaker, and we're changing the focus a little bit. We're going to have sort of two more localized users or creators of biorepositories in different sector regions of the world. We're going to start with Rosa Margarita Calves, and it represents the Aedes network, which is the mosquito Aedes network in Colombia. And we'll ask you to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, May. Thank you for everyone. Thanks for the invitation. Yes, my name is Rosa Margarita Helves. I am PhD student in Aix-Marseille University. My experience has been based on the use of the local biorepositories and data based in the field of the virology and molecular biology. And now I am in entomology as well. Today I have been fortunate to work with a great team of teachers in Colombia and France doing science. So today I want to share the successful experience of the local biorepository in Colombia and how this experience has helped overcome barriers. So the next, please. Okay, over the years, our research group has worked with different studies and cohorts on arboviruses, such as prognostic, diagnostic, and seroprevalence studies. These studies, especially the cohorts, allow to study and observe the dynamics of increase with the simultaneous circulation of the 4 dengue serotypes, the emergency of the chikungunya and Zika viruses, and the re-emergency of dengue in our region. And it's happened to all of us studying the current pandemic due to COVID-19. Capturing samples and data through the heterogeneous studies is not easy, and only 2 platforms allow these administrations. The Data Administration Unit and Biological Sample Unit allow to organize these 2 important aspects in the same way. These 2 units support the studies and allow data and sample information to be stored in order to maintain the quality. These units are coordinated by expert team in each of the areas. So the next. So having these units help to harmonize and manage the clinical variables, making them comparable through internal studies, and also allowing harmonization with external studies. In the case of the samples, handling unique SOPs with similar sample identification structure, for example, the same temperature conservation, cold chain, and in the test with serology tests, molecular biology such as PCR and sequencing, also allow the characterization of the samples. The combination of data and samples under this platform allow obtain a catalog of samples and the clinical and epidemiological information associated with these samples. Here, I want to make a note, and that is that having a clear governance model will allow process to flow and make it easier and easier to access to sample and data from these research groups. That under a clear and structural local governance model, it allows sharing the samples and data with the primary objective of being used of develop of new research question focused on public health for our particular case for the study of the emergency and reemergency of infection diseases. So the next. Okay. So this is my final slide. This is very short because it's just to leave the message that networking is the essence to cooperative work. Nothing will make sense if the work is done in a science network sharing experience, results, and research questions. And this is the case in the current pandemic. For our time, this is the first time that everyone thinks and acts in the same event. So joining forces by networking with partners around the world will allow to move faster in the fight against infection diseases. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this presentation, and it's very nice to hear what you're doing. It is a very good example of what we like to see as a virtual biorepository, so I'm grateful. Our next speaker will be Dr. Li Qingning from the National Environment Agency in Singapore. And you would all notice that there is a noted arbovirus link because many of us are arbovirologists. But I think these are some of the good examples, and she will present a coordination synergy for synergy and resource savings. So please start, Li Qing.
Hello, hi. So hello from the tropical side of Asia. So yes, we are a WHO collaborating center for arbovirus references. So today, I mean, it's an epidemic disease, just like COVID, it comes and go. So besides dengue, we do Zika and chikungunya. Okay, next please. So dengue, one of the major diseases that affect most of us is an endemic in more than 100 countries, including Singapore. And part of our work here is a lot of dengue diagnostic. So we do evaluation. We do quite a bit of evaluation of kits to make sure that we get the right, we have a good kit to do diagnostic for surveillance, whether it's dengue, chikungunya, or Zika, or JE. And moving forward, I think yellow fever will be an important disease to go under surveillance as well. Next, please. So as I mentioned just now, we do a lot of, maybe the previous slide again. We do a lot of testing. So we have an archive of samples, and I think that there's talk about virus, and we do have virus sample, which I think is relatively easy. So because they can be propagated, they can be well characterized. So many of our viruses are well characterized. We've got good panel collected within Singapore, characterized with a full genome sequencing. However, I think a major challenge for us is usually the sera sample, which is always limited, and as Stefano mentioned just now, often poorly characterized as well, because it's very difficult to characterize serum samples sometimes. So these are some examples. The following slides, 2 slides, I will go just quickly to show the challenges that we have. So these are some of the kits, diagnostic kits, whether it's NS1 test or IgM test. You see that the published data is often very good, up to 99% or 90%. However, when we test in-house with our sample, the sensitivity usually do not, often do not get to the same level as published data. Same, next slide, please. Same for IgM, we face the same problem. So let's see. So I think let's see why is it so. Next slide, please. So in our experience, data provided by commercial kits may not be reliable, mainly because samples used may be collected from non-endemic region or where cross-reactivity may be an issue. So kit performance may also be vary within different user country depending on the viral epidemiology background. Often samples do not take into consideration the various time point from onset of illness. Just like COVID, dengue, Zika, these are diseases with dynamic rise and fall of the virus. You know, you have initial rise, and then with the antigen and the virus emerging in the early phase of the disease, and then antibody coming out later. So the sensitivity could be very different at different time point. And so that could explain some of the discrepancy we see between a test result from different places or different studies. And it's not helpful because of this that there is I think there's a lack of a gold standard in many of these diagnostic tests. All tests have their own limitation, especially because of the rise and fall of biomarkers, as I mentioned. So it is very important to have well-characterized samples. If it's a positive, you know it is a true positive, and if it's a negative, you know it's a true negative. Otherwise, yeah, it will be the results will be so dependent on what is the gold standard that you use. So is a false positive a really false positive, or your test is actually better than the gold standard that you use? So I personally feel that it's very important to have consecutive collection, comprising early samples with PCR or NS1 positive, and then you see a zero conversion later on. So confirming that this case is truly positive. Or if you have PCR negative and no conversion later on, to confirm that it is a real negative. So the definition of positive and negative in a biobank, I think, is very, very important. So we need, I think there's a need for guidelines to standardize all these evaluation of performance of tests of the kits out there. A guideline on how on the standardized method of collection and evaluation of kit. So there goes the third point of the standardized panel of well-characterized sample, paired preferably, and from WHO or from this network would be very useful for all. And in addition to evaluation against cross-reactivity to other flavivirus markers, we should also be evaluating against other contribution of cross-reactivity, for example, SLE and anti-nuclear antibodies. And because of the unreliability of some of the tests that comes with the test, some kits, this kind of evaluation is done all over the world. You know, we do it in our lab, and I would think that some other laboratories are also doing. So repeating all these tests. So I've always wondered, how can we have a single panel where sort of a definitive results coming from a standardized, recognized panel, so that we don't have to repeat this kind of evaluation all over the world. So that's why I have titled this talk as coordination among different laboratories, different countries for synergy and savings of resources. That this kind of a panel will be very useful for many countries. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, I think virus sample is very easy to collect, it's easy to characterize. It's the sera sample, and especially because you need a significant volume as well. For this kind of a biobank for sera, or especially for antibody tests. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
So thank you very much, and that's a very nice perspective that you give us about what a biorepository could be used for. And so I thank the panelists very, very much. Your job is not done yet. We've got the question and answers. We'll put you guys on the spot in a minute. But I really want to just give a hand to all the panelists. Thank you so much. You've set the stage, and you've opened so many doors and so many questions. And we have lots of questions in the Q&A. I'm going to start by asking if Mark Perkins is online. Mark, there is a question about the WHO, the recent WHO resolution for biorepository. And I know I'm putting you on the spot, but could you just give us a quick flavor as to what the resolution is?
Yeah,
Mark?
hi, thanks very much, May. This is in recognition of the need for speed early on in outbreaks, as pointed out by a couple of the speakers just now. In the case of COVID, for example, there's been lots of virus sharing once it became a pandemic, but there was very little virus sharing prior to that time. So there was the request for that went out to countries to propose to share share their specimens, especially their viruses, early on, and many didn't want to do so. We thought the Director General of WHO proposed to develop a specimen repository that could, in early in outbreaks, receive things and send them on for research activities, to support research activities to identify the cause of the pathogen, etc. In a way that would facilitate exchange of information and not create complex legal situations. How exactly we're going to do that is unclear, but it is recognized that if we go down the Nagoya Protocol road, there is likely to be hesitation in sharing until there's confirmation in writing of what the benefits will be, and there you would face a year-long discussion while you're getting people are dying of whatever the infection is. So we're trying to shortcut that, and developing. We're now in the process of developing the rules for governance, etc. So it's very early days.
Yes, thank you very much for the comment. I know I put you on the spot a bit, but I think the audience also will pose the question so they know where WHO is. And of course, I think wherever some of us could be of assistance to help shape some of that we'd love to join you. So running to that one, thank you, Mark. So I'm gonna start doing some of the questions, and the very next question deals with what Mark just mentioned. And this is from Sarah Woodson at NIH. And I think, let me read it, and I'm gonna ask the panelists to reply in some ways, because this is sort of a crux of a lot of the issues. So for instance, she gives an example of the Democratic Republic of Congo has a policy in place that samples cannot leave their country unless there's tangible benefit, like funding or going back to the country. Or how could a global network handle situations like this? One strategy would have been to have them do as much as possible in the country, but not all research can be done, and not all projects and institutions will be able to pay for the samples, and we're not really sure if that's interest in the science. So would like the panelists to discuss, first, I would say, how would you discuss the local national prohibition for shipping out samples, and then how could this be more equitable and fairer so scientists can collaborate? I'm going to open up to the panel, and just maybe I can just choose somebody. Anthony, do you have some ideas about this?
Thanks, May. I apologize that the sound from my end wasn't clear earlier. I hope it's better now. Well, I'm afraid I'm not really coming with any solutions to this kind of problem, but what I can point out is that this is, as you said, precisely the problematic that this opens. The conversation on pathogen and benefit sharing is precisely complicated because it opens up this whole issue of global disparities in scientific capacity and technology. And in a lot of the interviews we conducted, we did discuss this in depth, and there were varied responses. One from, as I said earlier, hope that these kinds of discussions would lead to more fair and equity, but also at the same time, questions about how much an issue like the sharing of pathogens and sharing of benefits can really level out the playing field on a global level. How much can it really handle on its shoulders in terms of these global disparities? So a balance does need to be struck at some point, and it's not really to me to answer, but rather exactly what you're doing, which is a grassroots initiative of stakeholders to really hammer out the details and reach some form of consensus on fair and equitable benefit sharing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So other panelists, I see Rosanna and Stefano. Do you have any comments, or other panelists?
Yes, May. I think that we saw during SARS, we saw during Zika, that and most recently with COVID, that there are countries that they have laws that prohibits specimens from leaving the country. And so you cannot overcome or change those laws, in a second. And so I think that what Mark is doing with the WHO resolution to try and come up with more defined risks and benefits would help countries with allowing these samples to leave their country for future epidemics. I know that during Zika, I mean, the Director General actually went to one country to ask if there could be exceptions for them to ship their samples out, and was told no, because they cannot contravene the law of the country. That's why in my governance presentation, I said we have to respect the laws of the country, and that's something that we hope in time with what Mark is doing, things will change for a more global sharing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So comments from anyone else on the panel? So
Stefano, sorry, just one thing to add. What Rosanna said is very true. We also have witnessed that some countries, especially with COVID-19, had kind of relaxed some of their rules, specifically because they understood the importance of samples that could be collected in some specific circumstance. So while I completely agree, it's also true that these were exceptional circumstances. And for instance, obtaining ethical approvals was extremely quick when compared with what normally would be the process. And we also had some negotiations with countries that in the end allowed to export a fraction of the samples collected, just because they understood that they would have served a bigger purpose. So the other thing is, as the question was framed, yes, it is very important anyway to try to actually use the sample locally as much as possible, which is what I meant to say when I spoke about the fact that we want to conduct research and development in country. And it's not always very easy, but there is a scope. And last thing, I realized that when I was talking, the slides were not moving. I'm really sorry about that. So it's a shame, but.
We will post your slides and share them. So I'm going to give Chair's prerogative 1 more minute, and then we got to move to the next section. Okay.
Yeah. May, could I just add that, yes. You know, this sharing is so important as early as possible in the epidemic. And I like to give one example of how the EVA network, the European Virus Archive, has really helped the Africa CDC with the training workshops that they were conducting early in February. I happened to be in a dengue meeting with Xavier in January, and I asked him, how do we get primers and probes for the training workshop happening in the first week of February? And he arranged everything without hesitation. And we have a lot to thank Xavier and the European Archive Network for that. Otherwise, you know, we would have been totally unprepared in terms of the training workshop. So it's not just the specimens themselves, but having access to all the materials very early on for training.
Yes, and that's a really good point. And I think also building that trust among people, I think opens some doors that otherwise could be difficult. So I'm going to go ahead and take the chair's prerogative and close this session because we have another part. This has been really interesting. I'm going to ask the panelists to look at the Q&A section and answer what you can. Some of you already have, and then these will be posted as well, and we'll get to some of the other subjects. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce my the next part of our group today, and I'm going to turn it over to Judith Geary, who is a colleague of mine, and she's going to lead you through the benefits of participating in virtual biorepository survey. One of the things that we wanted to do with this beginning conversation, because you can tell from the questions and answers that this is a very deep and complex issue, but we want to tease out one little part, and in order to go through quickly to show you what the questionnaire is, and this is about benefits. So please, Judith, you can start.
So as May has introduced in the very beginning, we are very interested in getting the opinions of everybody on this call on what would be really the benefits, the incentives for participants in a virtual biorepository. And we understand that in order for a biorepository network or a virtual biorepository network to be sustainable and as a infrastructure that would be available again and again when needed in a hurry early during an epidemic, that it has to offer some benefits to those who participate and contribute specimens to it. Next slide, please. The first question, and so I'm going to lead you through the questionnaire, and then I'm going to stop at the end and ask for questions for clarification. So of course the answers to the survey in terms of benefits to participating will depend very much on whether you are representing a small laboratory or an institution or a country, which is why we are asking for some questions about what is the organization you represent and from where, from what part of the world. So the first real question here is about what the benefits would be. We are asking what would be the most important to the organization you are represent. Which of these benefits would be most important? Offering greater visibility and utilization of specimens, which as Stefano Ungarello has pointed out, is something that their directory could offer. Being recognized as a trusted source of specimen, getting access to additional funding, ability to network and collaborate with international partners, building capacity, and supporting test developers in your area, and for individuals, career growth and training opportunities, and authorship in publications and so on. So these are some of the things that we have listed, and of course, many of the small pilot that we have run, many have indicated that reputation as a trusted source would be very important to them, as would be networking and ability to collaborate. The next question is, which of the following support functions that virtual biorepository would offer would be most important? And this include, again, listing in a directory of specimens, inclusion in an online catalog of the type that the European Virus Archive is providing. Coordination of the basic logistics of access and distribution of specimens, like communication, review of requests, assistance with legal and ethical issues, laboratory informatics tools and support, access to expertise on biorepository and collection management, standardized procedures such as templates, SOPs, and so on, coordination of laboratory services if needed for characterizing the specimens. And again, from the very early kind of results we have had, to the listing in a directory of specimens was very important. Laboratory informatics was marked as very important. Standardization as well. And for many, the coordination of taking away the need to do themselves, the coordination and all the logistics seemed important. And then the next question was that which of these support functions or resources would allow you to actually participate in the VBR, so in the virtual biorepository resource. And of course, this included, for the most part, that all of these are needed. And again, IT support and tools was one that was pointed out, but basically all of these appear to be important. Then we asked a question that has come up many times already regarding benefit sharing, and asking the question whether does your country have a specific policy that requires that contribution of specimens be in accord with the Nagoya Protocol, and does your country have any rules to prevent sharing or shipping of specimens outside the country? And one of the interesting things, again, from a very small sample that we have so far, has been that many people really don't know. I think I'm afraid that this is not showing well, but the fourth choice here was, I don't know, and many people mark that I don't know. So obviously there is a need kind of for also better understanding of what the Nagoya Protocol means in terms of specimen sharing. And we asked the question, and again, that has been alluded to before, that if your country prevents you from sending specimens outside the country, would you be willing to, for example, perform tests or characterization of specimens in country? So we understand that this is very complicated, and this has already been kind of discussed in several questions and several of the discussions this morning. And we hope that this would be one of the topics that would lead to further discussion on the knowledge hub that we are setting up with the Global Health Network. And as I mentioned, there are two aspects of it. One of it is the complexity of benefit sharing, and the other one is lack of understanding in many cases of what it really means and who it applies to and when. So the last questions were, would you be interested in participating in such a network? And whether you would consider setting aside a small set of qualified specimens. This was specifically for COVID-19, but it would apply to other types of specimens and to be used specifically for reference panels. Again, it would mean that not your entire collection would become part of this virtual biorepository, but you would set aside the small set, perhaps large volume samples that could be used for various panels. And so I will stop now and ask for if you have any questions for clarification regarding this virtual biorepository survey, benefit survey. If I could move the next slide just to have that up for a second. We mentioned already that we are establishing this virtual biorepository knowledge hub on the Global Health Network site. And next slide, please. On that site, we posted this virtual biorepository benefit survey. And you can go to this site, and I think that the chat box shows also has the link to it, and take the survey. And I will stop for a second now and ask if you have any questions for clarification regarding this survey. And as mentioned, we want to hear from everyone on this call. We want to understand what would be the most important incentives or benefits for participating in a virtual biorepository resource. And of course, we understand that there is another side to it, which is what the users of the specimens need, and we are addressing that, and that will probably lead to kind of another discussion in the future. So I will stop for questions, and I'm afraid I can't see them, and maybe you can let me know if there are any questions.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, and I hope that you will be our participants will be encouraged to take a look at the survey so we can understand what your mindset would be. And what we're trying to do is to get the ideas from you and what is the priority for you to make this go forward. I think one of the questions, not directly related to the questionnaire, but maybe the panel can answer, is why would we want a virtual biorepository and not referring to access to physical resources of biological specimens, right? And would anyone like to say why we're talking about virtual biorepositories, starting with Judith?
I'm sorry, the question is why do this?
Why virtual?
Sorry?
Why virtual rather than a physical, I would assume centrally collected biorepository?
I think the concept that here is, again, very, very similar to what has been presented for the European Virus Archive, where this would be a set of resources that one could go, that set of biorepositories that would agree, biorepositories or laboratories that have collections that would agree to participate in this network. And this would be sustainable infrastructure if people get benefits from participating in it. And it could be mobilized then quickly when needed, rather than having to establish this set of relationships every time there is a new outbreak. That's the concept behind it. And again, the sustainability of it is something that we have focused on and will continue to develop. And I think there were some questions about funding and so on. All those are things that we hope that you will participate on the discussion forum that we are setting up on the website, on the Knowledge Hub.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And so we have a few minutes left. And I think we've come from the very high policy level down, all the way down through our panelists' examples and guidance in thinking about virtual biorepository. And this is very complex issue, as all of you can guess, can see. But I think what we want to do is start this conversation, and we really appreciate you joining us for this. What we want to know in the future is how we parse this better, and so that as the beginning of a conversation, it's a journey that we hope all of you undertake with us. And we've also shared with you that we will continue this discussion on the Virtual Biobank Knowledge Hub, for which you have seen the link. So I'm going to turn this over to the TGHN colleagues, and we have some few final things to ask of you before we dismiss you for the rest of your day, and some of you can go have your dinner or have your lunch or breakfast. So Helena, could we go ahead and move to the last part? So I think we've reached the half hour. We're pretty much on time. So thank you very much again. I want to thank the Global Health Network staff and others who have put this together with us. Thanks to Trudy Lang for allowing us to do this, and for the creation of this Biorepository Hub that we will be speaking to you from in the future. And please visit the hub. We'll post the recording of this and the answers and the questions and answers and information there you will find for biorepository, biobanking, virtual work, how to share, and many other aspects of what we've discussed. And we are hoping to have discussion topics monthly, for which many of you will be invited to join and give your opinion, and that we would like to see champions of each of these topics to sort of moderate the comments and opinion, and then return to you what the, not necessarily consensus, but what all the opinions are. But again, thank you very much. Thank you, Judith, for being a great partner, and we will see you again, I'm sure. Bye.